Welcome to another great episode today, talking about questions you need to answer before retirement. We'll go through four questions you need to be able to answer before you're ready for retirement. Kevin, we're going to pull up question number one, just get right into it. Question number one, what are your retirement goals?
Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing that you have to know. I mean, retirement's coming up and everybody sees the same thing. Oh, great, I'm going to be retired. I can be on a permanent vacation. That's not what it is. You know, the first 3, maybe even 6 months, that's where it is. But what are you going to do for the next year, the next 10 years, the next 30 years, depending on how early you retire? You need to have a goal for what you're going to do with your retirement. Are you going to be doing volunteering? Are you going to be looking at spending time with the grandkids? Are you going to be doing more sports and activities and things? Are you going to get a part-time job? Knowing what your retirement goals are huge, because otherwise 6 months in, you may be trying to find out exactly how am I going to spend my retirement. And if you don't have a plan for it, let's remember you were working. Now you're not working. How am I going to deal with this? Knowing what your retirement goals are probably is the most important thing to have going into retirement. And a lot of people just don't think about it, but they really should, shouldn't they?
Yeah, answering the question, what is it you're going to do? Of course, there's always the grand visions. We're going to travel, we're going to do some of it, which is perfect. Of course, you want to do that, but retirement can be a couple of decades, not just 4 or 5 months. So you really need a longer term plan to help answer that question. Really, what it is that you want to do in retirement? What are those goals? What does that lifestyle look like? Give some thought to that, plan that out. And then if it makes sense, well, of course, now you're ready probably for retirement. But that's only question number one. We said 4. Let's get to question number 2 here. Related to that is going to be the cost side, right? Maybe the retirement you envision is traveling the world and you're spending all the time in Europe and abroad, but realistically, is that affordable? And we look at budget from a couple of angles. The budget, of course, the lifestyle in retirement, right? How much does it cost to maintain that lifestyle? And then you can work backwards to make sure your plan is, in fact, able to do that. But also, Kevin, the retirement savings prior to that, right? What's your budget today? Are you putting enough aside, or your savings actually on track to get to retirement? So you're trying to answer that budget question kind of from 2 angles, right? The budget in retirement, does it actually match up with your goals and what's realistic? And also, are you budgeting enough today? Are your savings on track so you can actually get to retirement? So you're thinking about question number 2 here, that budget question from 2 different pieces. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, and that's exactly how you have to look at the budget scenario is where is it coming from? I mean, beforehand, if you're spending every dime that you have because you're working and you're doing it that way, maybe you don't have enough savings for what you want to do in retirement. And that's a huge factor. So first, you have to know exactly how much have I put away? What am I sitting at? And is this going to meet my retirement goal? It sort of goes back to the other one and having that financial plan, which is the Becker Orr mantra all times. But again, what you had beforehand may not be the same in retirement. Maybe you're not going to work. You're only using 1 car, not 2 if you're in a family of some format. So that after budget is also very important, because that's how you're going to deal with the monies that you have, whether it's getting pension money from the government, from a private pension, whether it's savings that you're using. You have to know what your budget is to be able to sustain it. Yeah, we'd all love to travel the world and do everything else, but is it feasible, as you mentioned? Probably not in certain aspects. So having that plan beforehand is one thing, but making sure you have that after budget retirement is really, really the big one. You have to know what you're spending in that time frame, because remember, there's not any more money coming in unless you go back to work. So you have to work within those parameters.
Yeah, you don't have to have it figured out to the penny accurate. Oh, I'm going to spend exactly $13.16 on, deodorant or whatever it is. But you need to have within the ballpark, and then you adjust as you go. But it has to be pretty close, right? You got to be in the parameters. You can't think I'm going to spend $5,000 a month after tax and you end up spending 10. Well, that's a pretty big change for your retirement. So getting within the ballpark of the budget, certainly important. And you already hit on it, Kevin. How do you do all that? Well, you need to have a financial plan, right? You need to have a forecast. You need to make sure you're on track with that forecast. And we can help folks do it exactly that. You can reach out to us, chatwithclintonkevin.com. See it on the bottom of your screen there. Go to the website, fill in the form. We'd love to hear from you, whether it's more questions like the ones we're answering today, or you want help with your plan. Reach out to us. We're certainly happy to do that. Moving on to number 3, question number 3 here, Kevin. I think this is one that's probably the most overlooked of the 4 that we're mentioning. I think people realize budget, they realize goals. They might not think as much about healthcare costs.
No, you're right. And again, basically, a lot of people don't even realize that. I mean, most jobs, there is some sort of a healthcare plan that you're on, a medical plan, a dental plan. It covers your teeth, it covers your prescriptions, it covers your medical visits and everything along those lines. And you pay for that somewhat, or your company's paying for it. Those are all costs that are covered. All of a sudden, when you retire, Maybe you don't have that anymore, or you get it at a much reduced scenario. These are things, especially as you get older, healthcare costs usually go up. So you really need to know, what is it? I mean, in Canada, as opposed to the US, we have some coverage that goes on because of the universal healthcare program we have, but it doesn't cover everything. So finding out what is covered either through your employer when you retire, or are there other plans out there that I can afford to pay for that are going to help me with my healthcare costs? These are things that people don't think about at the first time. And really, you have to put that in sort of your plan to figure out, okay, well, here's another expense that maybe I didn't have beforehand that now I'm going to have more of going forward.
Yeah, and there's no one size fits all. It's not that everyone needs to have this exact plan. It really has to be to your situation, but you do have to give it some thought, and it does have to match up with your needs and also with your budget, right? There's different costs depending on what you want to pick. If you want a certain dental package compared to if you don't, that'll certainly influence the cost. We have done a couple of videos specifically on this topic. We brought in Adam Buss to help us with that. So we'll link to the videos. It'll probably be somewhere up here in that area. You'll see the card you can click on if you want more details specifically as it relates to picking the best health benefit plan. We'll move on to question number 4 here, Kevin, that you need to have figured out before retirement, and actually has to do with estate planning details. I think about this in 2 terms. I think the first level is all the big documents. You got to have your will, your power of attorney, your healthcare directive, sometimes called the living will. You need those big documents, but also the tax efficiency, right? You want to make sure your beneficiaries are intact. You want to make sure the estate's going to transition smoothly to the next generation without too much tax. And that tax efficiency part might require some effort from you today in order to make sure it's reality in the estate. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, that's another factor of that whole scenario. As we mentioned right at the beginning, what are your retirement goals? Well, part of the retirement goal is to figure out how to maintain and live with your money going forward, and making sure, as you mentioned, that it's the most tax efficient method. And if I do have kids or an estate that I want to plan, I do have to make sure that that's going on. And you're right, making those plans ahead of time is huge. Too many people sit there and they want to push the will off. They want to push the power of attorney. Nobody likes to think of the fact of an eventuality of how life goes, but it is a necessary thing that has to be done. If you're not making these planning scenarios, who knows, if you're traveling or something happens along those lines, then it could be a real mess going forward. So to have that more enjoyable retirement, having these details all put together first is really nice. And then reviewing them in the time while you're retired and everything else also helps. But as you mentioned, it's twofold. It's getting the documents in order, and then it's making sure that you're tax efficiently drawing that money out, because the more tax efficiently you draw it out, the longer it can last, and you don't have to worry about things going forward.
Yeah, and the tax efficiencies part, a quick example, one that often talked about is the RSP, right? If you defer the RSP all the way through retirement, you're taking money from other sources, you don't touch the RSP, well, that can be a really big tax hit as part of your estate. So part of the estate planning would be that throughout retirement, you slowly draw down the RSP. So you can see how the two could be connected. And that's just one example. There are others, but part of figuring out the estate will involve lots of actions throughout retirement. So that's why something you need to think about before you get too far into retirement. So went through 4 there, Kevin, and we'll leave it there for today. There are other videos on similar topics. If you like this one, you'll probably love those videos. For example, 3 tips for new retirees. You can click that video. It's probably floating over Kevin right now, so you can click that, and we'll see you there. Take care, everybody.
Take care.